BC Premier David AB ਅਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਸਰੀ MLA ਕੌਂਸਲ ਨੇ ਹਾਊਸਿੰਗ ਅਫੋਰਡੇਬਿਲਟੀ ਅਤੇ ਹੋਰਨਾਂ ਮਹੱਤਵਪੂਰਨ ਮੁੱਦਿਆਂ ਤੇ ਆਪਣੀ ਹੁਣ ਤੱਕ ਦੀ ਕਾਰਵਾਈ ਅਤੇ ਭਵਿੱਖ ਦੀਆਂ ਯੋਜਨਾਵਾਂ ਬਾਰੇ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਹੈ। ਬ੍ਰਿਟਿਸ਼ ਕੋਲੰਬੀਆ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੀਮੀਅਰ ਡੇਵਿਡ ਏਬੀ ਨੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਵਿੰਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਘਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਸੰਕਟ ਨੂੰ ਹੱਲ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਦਿਨੀ ਕੁਝ ਨਵੇਂ ਐਲਾਨ ਕੀਤੇ ਸਨ। ਵਾਰਤਾ ਦੌਰਾਨ ਏਬੀ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਲੋਕ ਵੱਡੇ ਪੱਧਰ ਤੇ BC ਵਿੱਚ ਆ ਰਹੇ ਹਨ ਅਤੇ ਉਸ ਮੁਤਾਬਿਕ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਘਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਹਨ। उन्होंने कहा कि प्रस्तावित हाउसिंग सप्लाई एक्ट प्रोविंस और म्यूनसिपैलिटीज़ के दरम्यान बेहतर सहयोग द्वारा रिहायशी उसारी नूं तरजीह देने के लिए तैयार किया गया। BC वासियों नूं 2 टैक्स क्रेडिट देने का ऐलान भी किया गया सी तां जो महंगाई के इस दौर विचों गुजर रहे आम लोगों नूं कुछ राहत महसूस हो सके। इन्हां विच सब तो पहलां दसंबर विच हाइड्रो बिल विच एक बार $100 की लिविंग क्रेडिट की लागत ऑटोमैटिक लागू करन दी गल सी ते दूजा क्रेडिट $1,50,051 तो घट आमदन वाले परिवारां लई अफोर्डेबिलिटी क्रेडिट होवेगा जो कैनेडा रेवेन्यू एजेंसी द्वारा किया जाएगा और इसका भुगतान जनवरी के शुरू में किया जाएगा। प्रीमियर ने हाउसिंग पब्लिक सेफ्टी और हैल्थ नूं तरजीही करार दिता है। नाल ही होर भी कई अहम मुद्दों ते विचार चर्चा की गई है। देखो एक खास रिपोर्ट।
And as British Columbians, we have a role to play here too. We're seeing changing weather patterns in our province. You cannot be driving around in the snow with summer tires and hope that things are going to end up okay. We need British Columbians to be using winter tires as well right now. So I'm very grateful to the city councillors who have suggested a snow summit where we can coordinate with local government to ensure we're delivering road conditions for British Columbians. Also, for the city to address costs that are associated with transitions. Minister Farnworth is going to work with the City of Surrey to make sure that public safety is looked after and make sure that the citizens of Surrey get the response they deserve. One of my first announcements was around ensuring public safety across British Columbia. And we need a lot of agencies to be involved in that response. Agencies that support mental health, agencies that deal with issues around addiction, community leaders to support interventions against gang crime. Provincial government, we're going to provide the support financially, we're going to provide the support through the laws. As best as we can to ensure public safety, we need strong municipal partners in police and in city councils to guarantee that public safety. So we'll be working with the City of Surrey to make sure that that happens for the residents here.
And are we expecting any midterm elections next year?
So one of the interesting things that came out of my tour over the summer across the province was people asking me about all kinds of different issues. But I never heard one person, not even one person, say, you know what British Columbia needs right now is a provincial election. And so we are committed to the fixed election date. We're going to make sure that we use the time that we have, the 2 years before the next election, to deliver for British Columbians on their priorities, on housing, on healthcare, cost of living, public safety, and these are our priorities. None of us, nobody sitting up here got into politics because they loved elections and they thought elections should be all we do. Everyone up here and every MLA in our caucus got into politics to make government work for people, make government better for people, and to respond to issues in their community. And that's what we're going to spend the next 2 years doing.
Good.
Premier, since your government often talks about reconciliation, we all know that RCMP has an inconvenient history with indigenous communities. So why don't get rid of them once and for all?
There is a very lively discussion, both in Surrey and provincially, about the future of policing in our province. We had an all-party committee that looked at policing in our province, members from the Liberals, members from the Greens, members from the NDP, that made strong recommendations about ensuring that policing in our province is modern, that it responds to the concerns of communities, and that there's accountability, both around how dollars are spent, that they're effectively spent, but also when things go wrong, that the public has confidence that there's accountability. And so we are committed to implementing those recommendations from the all-party committee. We're committed to working with the City of Surrey to ensure public safety. And we're going to get to a result that delivers that for the residents of Surrey and for all British Columbians.
Premier, since you represent a party of Tommy Douglas, who was the architect of universal healthcare, which is in shambles right now, especially under your government. So how you defend yourself?
You know, the number one priority of every premier of every province and territory across Canada right now is healthcare. And the reason for that is healthcare systems across the country are facing very similar challenges. We're coming out of the pandemic where healthcare workers worked around the clock delivering services for British Columbians, and their colleagues got sick and were not able to come into work because those were the rules around COVID, which left fewer and fewer people to do more and more work as the public also got sick. So those healthcare workers are stressed out, they're strained, and now we have one of the worst flu and respiratory illness seasons in recent memory, on top of all of those other challenges. So to respond to this, we have a multi-part strategy. First of all, obviously, we're pressing the federal government to be a good partner to support us in our work on healthcare. But we can't wait for the federal government. We need to make sure that the healthcare workers that have training, that have experience, are not standing on the sidelines, that they're getting in and helping out in our hospitals, helping out family doctors to take more patients. And so you'll see us doing things like doubling the number of spaces in our international training program so that internationally trained doctors and healthcare workers can come up to speed and get to work right away. But you also see us working with the College of Physicians and Surgeons so that internationally trained doctors can work under the supervision of a British Columbian doctor and go to work right away. We've done similar things with nurses, and we're going to continue that work with health professionals. And we have a new minister, Andrew Mercier, the Minister for Workforce Development. One of his key agenda items is to work with regulators, not just in healthcare, but across the economy, to make sure people with international experience are able to get to work in the areas where they have the trainings and skills, making sure that their credentials are recognized. I was in Chilliwack. I feel quite passionately about this. I was in Chilliwack. I met with a family. The wife was a dentist. The husband was a surgeon. Both of them, though, didn't work in their fields where they had training and experience. She had been teaching dentistry at a university. He was the head of the surgical department at the hospital he worked at. Both of them were working for the local school board. And the reason for that was their training and experience was in Pakistan. And so for 15 years, they've worked for the local school board instead of working in the areas where they had training and experience, and especially when we need those healthcare workers not to be on the sidelines, but to be helping British Columbia families. So I feel quite passionately about this. It's a huge matter of urgency to get that support out there. That's the short term. In the medium term and the long term, we're opening new healthcare spaces. We've opened those new urgent primary care centers in Surrey, 2 of them. We have a new hospital opening in Surrey, the largest investment in our public healthcare system in our province's history. We have the first new medical school in Western Canada in 50 years, training doctors in Surrey, and the focus delivering care for British Columbians that they need. Healthcare is one of our government's key priorities, and everybody on this panel and all of our MLAs are committed to delivering on that. We know that the healthcare system's under a lot of strain, and we know that's a priority for families, that they get the care they need, especially when kids are sick. So we feel a huge amount of urgency around this issue.
Parinur, please.
My question is in continuation to what he just asked about the healthcare system. So I'm a dentist myself, a qualified dentist from India, and I've been writing exams for over 2 years now from India, and I'm still writing the exams. And when I go see people, like when they get to know I'm a dentist, they ask me questions like, why are you not yet practicing and stuff like that. But I really do not have any solid answer to that, because if that's the pace, first of all, the exams only happen like twice a year or once a year. And then the number of dental schools, if I have to just go to some dental school, the competition is, okay, everything is so competitive, I agree. Everything is competitive back in India as well. But how healthy is this competition? Like, you know, I failed my first exam twice just because I couldn't score like 1 mark. I was just 1 mark, you know, less of the cutoff, and I couldn't really clear it. Now, does that really question my competence or ability as a dentist after 7 years of experience back in country where I worked? Also, you know, Canada being such an immigrant-friendly country, they call skilled people here, but then people like me are just struggling, you know, not really doing what they ought to be doing. So what exactly, like, I really want to know, like, this would come as a personal interest as well. So what exactly are we doing on a ground level to, you know, to fight this thing? Like, where we say we are lacking the healthcare professionals, but at the same time, those who really want to work and have the capability, they're not really able to use their strengths or say, you know, their professions. So how do we deal with it on a ground level?
That's a great question. So our province, one of the big challenges facing our provincial economy is employers looking for skilled workers in the fields, in a number of professional fields. And at the same time, we have people with experience in those professional fields that are not able to take those jobs because their credentials and their skills are not recognized. This is costing everybody money in our province. This is costing our province economic growth. This is costing people who come to British Columbia and choose it as a home with a lot of hope to lose that hope and to feel that they're not seen and not recognized. This is a very serious problem. So what we've done is we took responsibility for this file out of the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, where it was one of a number of priorities. And we gave it to a Minister of State that it is his responsibility to work across government and with regulators on this issue. And I put in the mandate letter very clearly that he should be working on a new law with our government that will require regulators to set out a clear path for the recognition of the skills and abilities of internationally trained people, internationally trained professionals in our province, because that's the only way we're going to move forward. We've seen issues with dentistry. We've seen issues with the veterinary school. We've seen issues in healthcare and so many other professions. Sometimes we're able to deal with them voluntarily through negotiations and conversations with these colleges, and sometimes we're going to have to use a law to require them to deliver these results. A clear, predictable, transparent path for professionals that they can actually achieve so they can start working using their skills. And so, you know, when I hear about stories like yours, concerns like yours, these are not unique. These are far too common across the province, and especially in communities where they're desperate for workers with those skills. So this is a priority for me and for our government and for that new Minister of State position to champion that work.
Well, I'm not satisfied with your answer, but I'll still move forward.
Well, I don't blame you until you're working as a dentist, you know, and that's my commitment too.
Yeah. So we recently saw a shuffle in your cabinet, like Mr. Whiteside moved from education to mental health, and there were some ministers removed from the cabinet, like Minister Nicholas. So what really was the reason for that shuffle? Like, where did you feel the need for that shuffle?
There were a couple of key considerations around filling a cabinet, but the main one for me was making sure that every British Columbian, when they look at our cabinet, that they see themselves represented there. Now, not yet, not every seat is held by the NDP, right? And yet, as a government, we have to represent every British Columbian. And so when they look at cabinet, when they look at our team, that they see themselves represented. So, for example, you know, there's a Minister of Finance who is a strong rural representative. She comes from a small community in the province and is able to make sure that that perspective is represented around the table. You see strong representation from fast-growing communities up the Fraser Valley, including Surrey. You see representations of the diversity of our province. You see women in positions of strength and responsibility. And so for every single area of our government, I want British Columbians to be able to see themselves and to know that their perspectives are represented. John did really important work, Premier Horgan did really important work in setting that foundation and having a strong team so that British Columbians see themselves represented in the caucus. I also wanted to make sure that was the case. The other piece is, you know, it's helpful on some files where we're facing particular challenges to have different perspectives, to have new people coming in. to give people opportunities to try different files, and you see a number of new faces around our table as well. So you'll see both people with extensive experience and more recently elected MLAs. That is to ensure that when we're having those conversations around the table that we're not stuck in the old way of doing things, but at the same point we also have that voice of experience to avoid mistakes that we can avoid. So that was the balancing act we were trying to do, and I'm really excited about the team we have, both the MLAs and the cabinet, to deliver for British Columbians.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. My question was already answered, but I have another question. Our school system, like a lot of young kids, they're into drugs and gangs. If you can see in schools' washrooms, grade 8 kids, they're doing vaping in the schools. There's a lot of kids that are getting killed and all that. And when it comes to the schools, they don't want to take responsibility. They just think about their, they don't want to get involved into that. So what we should do in that case, like to resolve that, like a lot of kids are, they're getting into the drugs and all that. It's the drugs are selling on the premises of the school, but schools are not doing anything.
Thanks. So it's absolutely vital that every British Columbian, when they send their kid to school, they know that kid is going to a safe environment where they're going to learn, where they're going to be supported, where they're going to be successful. And that's a concern that I share as a parent. When I send my kids to school, that's what I expect. And I know that's what every British Columbian expects. You've seen our government act on the issue of vaping, for example, to increase the costs, to restrict the access to flavored tobaccos, to restrict access to illicit drugs. But also, you've seen us increase funding and make that funding stable for programs that intervene early with youth to prevent them, especially youth that are at risk, to prevent them from getting involved in gang activity, for example, through the RAP program. In addition, in our recent community safety plan, I know that one of the reasons why young people can be attracted to a gang lifestyle is the idea that maybe this means money and cars and jewelry and those kinds of things. And so we will be introducing legislation that allows us to seize the assets of criminal gangs in our province that are feeding on the toxic drug crisis we see in our province, that are preying on youth, that are preying on vulnerable people, to take the houses, take the cars, take the jewelry, using unexplained wealth orders. It was a recommendation to us through the anti-money laundering public inquiry, something that we could do. You've also seen us increase funding for policing to make sure that the specialist teams, especially the child exploitation teams and the anti-organized crime teams, have the resources they need to do work in our province. That was one of my first acts as Premier. So from police to kids who are at risk, to seizing the assets of organized crime and making it difficult for them to do business in our province, you'll see us act strongly on this issue because protecting our young people should be our #1 priority.
Thank you.
Premier Bey, you just touched the issue of overdose crisis as well. I want to specifically ask a question regarding that. So we saw another grim year as far as the overdose deaths are concerned in the province. We further crossed the grim milestone of 10,000 overdose deaths since the declaration of public health crisis, public health emergency in 2016. Can we expect a better 2023 as far as this issue is concerned? If yes, how?
Thanks. There are so many families and friends of people who have died or been seriously injured when they used toxic drugs that are grieving and whose lives have been changed forever. We take this issue really seriously. For the period before the pandemic, we started to see some progress. And then the pandemic hit, the borders closed, and the drugs that the organized crime groups were shipping became more and more toxic, more and more concentrated, and we've lost that ground. Having a new minister in this role, Minister Whiteside, gives us the opportunity to look at what we're doing and make sure that we are focused on the best policies, the best evidence-based policies, to ensure that where we're putting our efforts is going to work. One of the things that British Columbians are going to see is a real push and an increased emphasis on treatment for people struggling with addiction. We've done important work around reducing stigma so that people feel that they can come forward and say, hey, I'm struggling with addiction, I need help. Family, friends, I need help. We've done important work around giving doctors and nurses the tools to get between people struggling with addiction and the criminal gangs, to try to keep them alive. All of that work is about trying to find opportunities to get people into treatment. We're really excited, I'm really excited about our work with St. Paul's Hospital, a new model of drug treatment where when someone goes to the emergency room with an overdose and they wake up and they have that moment of I can't keep living like this, that the doctor can say, that door right there is the detox door. You walk through that door, we can get you into detox right now. You can go from detox to treatment. You can go from treatment into supportive housing if that's what you need, so that it's seamless from the emergency room. That model has the potential, if it's successful, to go province-wide. And we're also going to look for other opportunities around treatment as well, so that when people have that moment of clarity about drug use, that they have that opportunity to deal with it. This is one of the most challenging issues for families and certainly for government. The drugs are profoundly toxic. And so giving people a chance to get into treatment is our best hope to try to drive some of those numbers down.
Thank you for that. Is there any other areas where you think the BC government could have done better in 2022, which you would like to change in 2023?
Thanks. There are a number of priority areas that I heard about from British Columbians when I traveled the province. They said, we thought the COVID response was good. Our economy is coming back. You did really good work around protecting jobs and businesses through that incredibly difficult time, responding to disasters like the atmospheric rivers, all these other challenges that we faced. Good for you. But we need more. We need you to do work on housing. We need you to do work on healthcare. We need you to make sure that you're supporting us with the costs of daily life. We need you to support us around public safety and building a strong economy that's going to weather these global headwinds that we're seeing right now. And so those priorities of British Columbians, for our government to do more, are my priorities. They're the priorities of every person along this table, all of our MLAs and our cabinet. We're going to make sure that we deliver for British Columbians on their priorities. And given that this is the Surrey Media Roundtable, fast-growing communities like Surrey have big pressures that they're facing around schools, around essential infrastructure, things that make community life great, swimming pools, sports fields, trails. So providing support to those fast-growing cities that are under a lot of pressure is going to be a priority for us as well. So it's a big challenge, but it's a very exciting time for our province.
Permeet from Red FM.
Good morning, Premier. My question is regarding housing affordability. So providing shelter to homeless people is must, and your government is taking effective initiative to resolve that. But the new home buyer are struggling right now. I know I'm sounding like a broken record, but the problem hasn't been resolved yet. So there is no relief with increasing mortgage prices. Also, the new housing projects in Lower Mainland does not cater to lower or middle income group people. So I would like to ask you, how is your government planning to resolve the issue?
Thanks, that's a great question, and I've got our new housing minister as well. I'll pass it to him once I'm done. One of the things that we're seeing, British Columbians are seeing, is that people with reasonable jobs, with decent incomes, are looking for a place to rent. They're looking for a home to buy, and they can't find it. It's like they can't see a way that they're going to be able to get into the housing market. And this is very discouraging, especially for young people that are looking to start their lives. It's very distressing for people, right? It doesn't make sense. And so we're having to do something that government hasn't done before at the provincial level at the scale that we're looking at, which is to provide housing for middle-income people, to work with municipal governments, with the private sector, with not-for-profit organizations, to provide that middle income housing. You've seen initiatives around the area immediately around transit stations as a start, where government is buying up the land around transit stations so we can deliver actually attainable housing for the people who really actually use public transit. The strange thing was, and the old way of doing things is that government would put in the transit station, the land value would rise around the transit station, meaning that the people who bought the homes closest to the transit stations were the people the least likely to use public transit. So making sure that our housing policy makes sense is key, but we have a lot of work to do to make sure that we're supporting people to get into that housing. I've heard people say, with interest rates going up, that the housing market is cooling off and getting more affordable. Everybody knows that's not true. The reality is, when interest rates go up, that prices come down because that's the amount of money that families can afford to pay. It doesn't make housing more affordable, so what we need to do is increase housing supply for people, for middle income housing. So that'll be a big priority for us and for the new housing minister, because when we don't have that, people that have reasonable incomes bid up the housing that used to be lived in with people with low income and fixed incomes, and then those people are ending up homeless, driving increased homelessness in our province. So the whole housing system is interconnected. When we provide that housing that we need for the middle income, we support people that are struggling on the very edges of the housing market right now. Now I'll pass it over to Minister Kahlon.
Thank you, Premier. Yeah, the 1 week I've been on this file, I've had a lot of people reach out to me to talk about it, and what I've heard from them pretty clearly is that everyone has housing on their mind. If you're a young person, you're thinking about, forget about buying. A lot of young people are thinking about how are they going to rent a place? How are they going to be able to go to school and have a place nearby where they're wanting to study? You know, many people are struggling. Even elders are like, how are my kids going to be close to me? How are my grandkids going to be close to me in this housing market? So it's a top of mind issue for everyone. And the Premier's laid out a pretty bold vision for housing. You know, and at the core of it, it's speed, supply, and synergy. We need to make sure housing gets on faster because right now we're in a crisis. And, you know, when we formed government, prior to us coming to government, the budget roughly was about $70 million to $100 million a year to build housing. When we came in, we're over $1 billion a year. Now, the challenge we have is the investments have increased, but only now, 5 years later, we're starting to see that housing come online. It shows you how long it takes to get the permits, to get the approvals after you've announced it, and that's too long. And so, yes, some positive news. There's going to be a lot of new openings of units coming online because of the investments we've announced, but it also means that we're behind. And this is a challenge not only here in BC, across the country, but we have a unique challenge. We have the strongest economy in the country. People are coming here in historically high numbers because they see the opportunity. But it goes also to a question earlier that was raised. New immigrants are welcome. We want new immigrants here. But when they come here and see the chips are stacked against them, it's hard to keep them here and keep their talents here. And so the priority for us will be speed, working with local governments. The Premier's laid out an ambitious agenda around setting targets in communities about how much housing they're going to need to bring on and how fast they're going to bring on. We're going to support them in that effort. It's going to require not only market housing. If you have a new building and it's all $1 million units, that doesn't help anybody in the community. So how do we make sure that when a building gets approved, there's housing available for people who are wanting to rent? There's units available for those who have lower and middle income that want to afford, as well as those units for perhaps the high-end earners. So we are going to need to make sure we have private sector housing, not-for-profit, co-ops, social housing, student housing at universities closer to schools so kids don't have to travel all that distance. That's going to be the priority that the Premier has laid out that we'll be working on. And lastly will be synergy. We can't do it alone. It's going to require local government, BC, and the federal government. And so far, I'm hearing positive things from all of them, and I look forward to getting to work with all of them on that.
Thank you for answering that. My second question is regarding the economy, which you have mentioned. And now I consider, or I think most of the people agree with me, that the small business owners are the backbone of a BC economy. But the financing options, if they want to start up a new business or get involved in anything, the finance options are available on very high interest rate. And eligibility criteria is also very complex. What could be done to make the process easier so that they can concentrate on contributing in the economy and utilize their skills and providing employment in return?
Well, small businesses are the backbone of British Columbia's economy. We have we have way more small businesses than we have medium-sized or large businesses. And so we've taken significant steps. I think it's important to highlight, and the Premier highlighted it. We invested $500 million in the pandemic to support our small businesses. Some governments chose to give loans. We knew that it was going to be hard for the small businesses to pay the loans back after. It wasn't going to be like the pandemic was over and all of a sudden they were going to be successful. We knew we had to put that long-term support, and we made grants available for them so they didn't have to pay us back. We gave them flexibility to use the money however they wanted to do it. We also have programs in place that provide low-cost loans for small businesses. We also have programs in place that help businesses that are run by new immigrants, that are being run by women, by Indigenous communities, to give them the tools such as setting up their online e-commerce business so that they can reach a bigger market. So we've got a whole bunch of programs through Small Business BC that we're providing to support small businesses, and we're going to do that in a bigger way as we move forward. But it's important to know that since the pandemic, we lost a lot of businesses, small businesses. We saved a lot, but we lost some. But we're starting to see an increase now in small businesses. People are opening up businesses at a higher rate, especially young people. Young people are entrepreneurial, and we're starting to see a lot of young people starting up small businesses. And so I'm hopeful that the small business community will continue to grow, and we're lucky. If you talk to Ian Tossison of the Restaurant Association, he'll tell you that BC did better than any jurisdiction in North America, partly because we made sure that businesses could stay open. We weren't thinking, how do we shut them down? We said, how do we keep them open? But also because of the programs we put in place. And I know the Premier's made it clear we're going to continue to support the businesses through the rest of the recovery as well.
Trade is also a key part of our strategy to support business in the province, to take advantage of the connections that we have here in British Columbia to places around the world. And we have a new minister responsible for trade. I wonder, Jagrup, if you have anything to share about businesses and trade.
Yeah, I'm also on the file for almost 1 week. I met with my officials. What I want to say to you is that trade is very important to build a safe, sustainable, and fair economy, and to create good jobs for the people of British Columbia. What I want to do is, of course, as Premier said to me in my mandate letter, that we need to strengthen the relationship with the trading nations we already have, which is 19 locations we have in place, and also, diversify to other trading markets. So that's what we're going to do in the coming years. So what I want to say is that I want to bring our trade office particularly to the ethnic community, South Asian community, Chinese community, and Filipino community, and more, so that they know what we're doing and how can we help them to go outside and put their products and put their services in the global market. So I will make sure that our trade office is fully connected with the minority community, particularly, as said to you earlier, the South Asian community, Chinese, and Filipino community, so that they can create good jobs as well.
Just a heads up, we have 10 minutes left and we are trying to accommodate everyone's questions here.
Why are you looking at me? Why are you looking at me? I'm going as fast as I can.
Thank you, Premier. So, Sameer Kaushal from Sher Punjab.
Good morning, and thank you so much for taking my question, Premier. First of all, welcome, and sorry. Premier, we know we all are going through the same challenges, whether it's COVID-19 or RSV or homelessness, drugs, overdose. We know your government is focusing on with the targets of current population basis. But on the other hand, the feds are already choked out their plan for the future that within 10 years there are going to be millions of more new immigrants in the country. And as our new housing minister already confirmed this thing, that the West Coast is the favorite destination for the new immigrants. What kind of infrastructure we have in plan, and how will you ensure that British Columbians, or your government, as you are the representative for the government, how will you ensure that BC going to get their fair share from the feds when other provinces are fighting aggressively for their share?
That's a really good question. So we set a record last year in British Columbia for the number of people moving here from other countries and from other provinces across Canada. In the first 2 quarters of this year, we're on track to set another record. Partially, this is international immigration through federal government programs, and partly it's people moving from other provinces to British Columbia because there are a number of opportunities here that they can't find in other provinces. We're proud of that. We're excited about that. That's very good news. But the challenge that that presents is it puts strain on the infrastructure of our province, on schools. I mean, Surrey sees that as a fast-growing community. We're putting significant resources into new schools, and the population is growing as quickly as we're building new schools. So this is important for us to respond, to make sure that infrastructure is in place, the schools, the hospitals, the transit, the roads, so that life remains of a high standard in British Columbia for everybody who chooses to come here. We have, I am afraid to say, not been able to get the federal government's attention on critical issues like housing to ensure we get at least the same per capita, the same population amounts that other provinces are seeing. And it's been frustrating for me to see that. And I have communicated that to the Prime Minister, that British Columbia must see our fair share on healthcare, on housing, on other federal initiatives. And the Prime Minister was very clear that he understood that and he would work with us on that. To ensure that that's true, you will see our ministers, our MLAs, traveling to Ottawa more frequently to be face-to-face with federal government ministers, with the Prime Minister, with key staff members, to make sure that they are thinking about British Columbia all the time. They're located in Ontario. They're right beside Quebec. They have provinces that are talking about separation. And so they have a lot of things on their plate. To make sure that they are having British Columbia front of mind, we have to be in Ottawa. We have to be there physically, reminding them to prioritize and deliver for British Columbia. We're great partners on the childcare initiative. This is an example of the kind of success that we can have, where we were the first province to reach a deal with the federal government on childcare that's putting $900 a month back in the pockets of families every single month. That is massive for families. We did that announcement a week and a half ago with the Prime Minister, an additional $500 on top of the money that we had already delivered for families. Those are the kinds of successes that we can see when we're in the face of the federal government, pushing for our fair share, but we have to be pushier about it because otherwise we'll get lost in the noise of Ottawa. So we're going to be out there physically, making sure, pressing our case for British Columbia every day.
Uminder from Asian Star.
Thank you, Harun. Mr. Premier, thank you for taking the question, and it's good to see so many ministers from Surrey and Delta here. I think Surrey has the largest number of MLAs in the government and now the largest number of ministers in the government. So we will see that will translate into more government investments, government offices in Surrey and Delta. If it doesn't, there won't be any excuses 2 years later. My question, Premier, is this. Over the weekend, there was a story in Daily Hive online newspaper about housing and how money that is put in housing and for homelessness is used up, and the words used were corruption, and words that were used were like favoritism, the money that was being given. Atira Women's Society was mentioned. And I also believe the former CEO of BC Housing was mentioned and the links, what happened there. And as well, VANDU, the Vancouver Area Network for Drug Users was mentioned as well. And they said, the article very clearly said that money that is meant for homelessness projects is basically used up in salaries for advocates, for other people who work for these organizations. And same is happening not only here, but in LA, San Francisco, as well as Seattle, and now in Vancouver. So that's why this problem of homelessness is not going away. There are no houses because money is used up to pay advocates, right? So I'm just wondering whether your government will look into this. I know you're aware about what happened with Atira Women's Society when you were the Minister for Housing. And is there going to be an investigation? Is going to be an inquiry or something you're going to look into this?
Thank you. Thanks for the question. I think on your first question about Surrey MLAs, and incredibly proud to have so many MLAs from Surrey, so many cabinet ministers from Surrey. I might invite Gary Begg or Harry Baines to weigh in on their role and responsibility as Surrey MLAs, as well as cabinet minister in the case of Harry. But but on this issue of making sure that the money that is provided from the province actually goes to delivering the services that British Columbians need, every British Columbian should know that that is a priority for me. When I was responsible for ICBC, and I was told that the only way forward under our current system was a 30% plus rate increase to make sure that ICBC wasn't losing more than $1 billion a year. We did the work to bring in a new insurance system to deliver some of the lowest rates in Canada for British Columbians, and a Crown Corporation that is now rebuilding its capital reserve because it's actually breaking even and making money, which is important. And at the same time, we were able to give rebates for drivers, and we were able to announce a rate freeze for the next 2 years for drivers. When I was responsible for the BC Lottery Corporation, when there was a massive international money laundering ring operating in our casinos, laundering cash, we brought that to an end. We exposed it to British Columbians, and we had a full examination through public inquiry. When I was responsible for BC Housing, and I was told about the Little Mountain housing development, where a whole low-income community had been flattened by bulldozers, everybody displaced, and what was left behind was an empty lot and an interest-free $100 million loan for a private developer made by the province of British Columbia. Absolutely unacceptable. My concern was that we didn't have the controls in place to make sure that never happened again. So I put a board in place at BC Housing that includes former Auditor General, former head of the public service, under the BC Liberal government, by the way, nonpartisan board, to look at the best practices to make sure that taxpayers can have confidence about what's happening at BC Housing. We are investing in housing in British Columbia, and we are delivering housing, 36,000 units of housing complete, under construction, in development right now in our province. BC Housing, the largest residential housing developer, perhaps in North America, certainly in Canada, working in partnerships with nonprofits and the private home builders. So really important work that's happening there, but the public has to have confidence. Right now, I asked Ernst & Young to go in, do a review from head to toe of BC Housing. They came back. They had a number of recommendations for us, and they said we need to do more work on this particular area. And so we sent them back in to do more work. They are in the process of completing with the Controller General for BC a full forensic audit of British Columbia's BC Housing to make sure that every person in our province can have confidence about what's happening there. This is a priority for me, that Crown Corporations run well, that they deliver services that they say they're going to deliver, that they do it efficiently, they do it effectively, and we will leave no stone unturned in making sure that that happens. I want British Columbians to have confidence about that. It's important because you have to have confidence in these organizations because they're publicly owned. Those are public dollars. And so you'll see us continuing work on that.
Surrey, Link Newspaper.
Hello, Premier, and my question is for you and for Minister Callow. You have talked about affordable housing. It is related to that. An important part of affordable housing policy is working with municipalities. So I just wanted to ask you, how has been the response so far when working with municipalities? Because every municipality works in its own way, but there are policies that have been put forward by the provinces. So how have they, or if you have faced any challenges so far with respect to this?
Sure, thanks, and I'll try to be brief. These are great questions, so I'm going on a bit longer than I wanted. I've been really excited by the response of newly elected mayors and mayors across the province around the issue of housing. I was very concerned. We talked about the need for cities to prioritize building the housing we need with our population growing so quickly, the economic success our province has seen, that we need to build that housing. That's essential infrastructure. And initially, the Union of BC Municipalities, I was worried that we weren't on the same page. That's no longer the case. I have talked with the Union of BC Municipalities. I've talked with mayors of cities, big and small. They say, we want to partner with you. We understand, too. We heard in the municipal election, people want this housing built. And that includes Surrey. That includes big cities like Vancouver and Victoria, but also small cities that want to partner with us and do this important work. And I'll turn it over to the Housing Minister to talk about his experience.
Yeah, in my experience so far has been very positive. Every mayor that I've had a call with understands that we're in a crisis. I think the Premier has made it clear that this is a major issue we have to deal with. Our economy depends on this. Our population depends on this. And the mayors have made it clear to me that they want to work together. They understand that we have tools in place if a local government doesn't do its part to contribute to addressing the housing challenge. But I'm hopeful that we don't need to use any of those tools because the mayors have said it clearly to me. But we have a problem. You know, if a person wants to build a basement suite to give more affordable rental spaces available to people and they have to go through a 6-month waiting, we have a problem. If somebody wants to tear a house down and build additional units in that new house they're building, and they have to wait a year, and then at the end of it, they have to go to the community and ask for their permission. We have a problem with it. And so we have to relook at everything we do, and the mayors have told me that they're interested in that conversation and look forward to having that with them in the coming months.
Kuljeet from Media Waves.
Hello, Premier. Good to see you with all the cabinet. And I don't know about others, but I'm very happy for your new ministry for the housing. And my question and concern, which I largely discussed with you, thanks for giving 10 minutes, is with that the people who are below the poverty line, hiring a house otherwise is tough, but for them it's extra tough. But with their numberings on their name, the people who are getting maximum money from the government, and still people on the receiving end are not receiving it. And for that, middle person is having the maximum benefits and they are not accountable. I would request for look into the board of directors, accounting departments, and their relationships in between, and the money which is collected through the radiothons, where they are going. Another request, the organizations who are representing so-called minorities, for example, PICS, we are getting lots of complaints about their work ethics. Can you promise me that the government will not just look into it thoroughly, but find the solutions also? Because certainly I don't want people to get away with everything just by looking as a minority, but their ethics are not there. I need your word on that.
Thank you. So I want all British Columbians, all residents of Surrey, to have confidence that if it comes to public dollars, public investments, that our government will work to ensure the accountability and the transparency so that you know that when we're putting the money into services that are badly needed by people who are hungry, people who don't have housing, people who need supports, that money is actually getting to where we want it to get, that the administrative costs and other costs are under control, and that the services are being delivered to the people who need them. Now, I know specifically in the situation of PICS that there is an audit underway with KPMG, and we'll be making sure that for provincial support, that accountability is there. And that's the case for all of our nonprofit organizations. We expect them to provide audited annual year-end financial reports. For the forensic audit that's underway at BC Housing right now, the Comptroller General has the ability to follow money from BC Housing to any nonprofit operator, public money, to make sure it's used in the proper way. Anytime that concerns are raised with government, I want everybody to know, and including and especially people who are living in social housing or receiving these services, if they have concerns, they can write to my office, they can write to the housing minister, raise these concerns, and we will follow up on those concerns. I also want to underline, there are thousands of people that are volunteers, that are working for nonprofit organizations, that work through the pandemic, work huge extended hours to deliver services to vulnerable people that are tired, I want to say how much I respect and appreciate this is religious communities, cultural communities, nonprofit workers that deliver those services, how much I appreciate that work that they do to stretch those public dollars so they go to as many people as possible.
Rajpal Singh Gill.
Thank you, Premier. My question in Punjabi language.
Okay.
Mr. Kalon or Mr. Jagrup Barad. Okay, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਸੰਬੰਧ ਸਪੋਰਟਸ ਨਾਲ ਬਹੁਤ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈਵੀ ਤੌਰ ਤੇ ਬੜੇ ਤਗੜੇ ਸਪੋਰਟਸਮੈਨ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਫੀਫਾ ਕੱਪ 2026 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੈਨਕੂਵਰ ਕੁਝ ਮੈਚ ਉਹ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ USA ਐਂਡ ਮੈਕਸੀਕੋ ਤੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਲਈ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੋਈ ਪਲੈਨਿੰਗ ਹੈ ਕੋਈ ਉਹਦੇ ਲਈ ਕੁਝ ਉਹਦੇ ਲਈ ਅਪ ਟੂ ਡੇਟ ਜਾਂ ਕੋਈ ਬਰੀਫਿੰਗ ਫੀਫਾ ਕੱਪ 2026 ਇਨ ਵੈਨਕੂਵਰ
ਅਸੀਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਐਕਸਾਈਟਡ ਹਾਂ ਵੀ ਫਰਸਟ ਆਫ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਫੀਫਾ ਦਾ ਫਾਈਨਲ ਸੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਐਕਸਾਈਟਿੰਗ ਸੀ ਈਵਨ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸੌਕਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਵਾਚ ਕਰਦੇ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਹੁਣ ਫੈਨਸ ਬਣ ਗਏ ਆ ਅਤੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਵੀ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਐਕਸਾਈਟਡ ਹਾਂ ਵੀ ਅਗਲਾ ਵਰਲਡ ਕੱਪ ਨਾਰਥ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਨੂੰ ਆ ਰਿਹਾ ਸਾਡੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਅਗਰੀਮੈਂਟ ਆ ਫੀਫਾ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਉਹ ਇਹ ਆ ਵੀ ਆਈ ਬਿਲੀਵ 40 ਗੇਮਾਂ USA 'ਚ ਹੋਣੀਆਂ 10 ਗੇਮਾਂ BC ਕੈਨੇਡਾ 'ਚ ਹੋਣੀਆਂ ਅਤੇ 10 ਗੇਮਾਂ ਮੈਕਸੀਕੋ ਸਿਟੀ 'ਚ ਹੋਣੀਆਂ ਸੋ ਰਾਈਟ ਨਾਓ ਫੀਫਾ ਨੇ ਡਿਸਾਈਡ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤਾ ਵੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਮਿਕਸ ਕਿੰਨਾ ਵੀ ਟੋਰਾਂਟੋ ਕਿੰਨੀਆਂ ਗੇਮਾਂ ਹੋਣੀਆਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਕਿੰਨੀਆਂ ਹੋਣੀਆਂ ਬਟ ਸਾਡੀ ਐਕਸਪੈਕਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਆ ਵੀ ਕਾਫੀ ਗੇਮਾਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਹੋਣਗੀਆਂ ਅਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਵਰਲਡ ਨੂੰ ਸ਼ੋਅ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਵੀ ਕਿੰਨੇ ਲੱਕੀ ਹਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਥੇ BC ਵਿੱਚ ਅਤੇ ਵੈਨਕੂਵਰ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਤੇ ਮੋਰ ਡੀਟੇਲਸ ਆਈ ਥਿੰਕ ਫੀਫਾ ਤੋਂ ਵਿਦਿਨ ਦ ਨੈਕਸਟ ਈਅਰ ਆਉਣਗੀਆਂ ਬਟ ਇਨ ਦ ਮੀਨ ਟਾਈਮ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇੰਨਾ ਪਤਾ ਵੀ ਵਰਲਡ ਕੱਪ ਗੇਮਾਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਆ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਅਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਪ੍ਰੈਪਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਆਲਰੇਡੀ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਉਹ ਗੇਮਾਂ ਦੀ
ਅਮਰਪਾਲ ਸਿੰਘ
ਜਦੋਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਮਿਲੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਫ ਕੋਰਸ ਪਬਲਿਕ ਮੇਕ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਫੀਫਾ ਰਾਈਟ ਨਾਓ ਅਬਾਊਟ 2 ਮਹੀਨੇ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਆਏ ਸੀ ਸਾਡੀ ਸਟੇਡੀਅਮਸ ਰਿਵਿਊ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਅਸੈਸਮੈਂਟ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਵੀ ਸਿਕਿਉਰਿਟੀ ਅਸੈਸਮੈਂਟਸ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਸੋ ਆਪਣਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕੰਮ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਰਨਾ ਪੈਣਾ ਉਹ ਸਾਰਾ ਕਰ ਹਟੇ ਆ ਅਤੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਬਲੀ ਇਨ ਦ ਨੈਕਸਟ 6 ਮੰਥਸ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਡੀਟੇਲਸ ਮਿਲਣਗੀਆਂ ਅਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਫ ਕੋਰਸ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨਾਲ ਸ਼ੇਅਰ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ
ਅਮਰਪਾਲ ਸਿੰਘ
Rising cost and inflation, everything is increased, and I'm still very confused how the housing will go decrease, right? City permit fee increase, and every tradement cost is increased, and everything is increased. And the capitalists, so-called capitalists, misusing the free trade, and no cost came down. Even the container shipping cost way down now. But no one did the down. It's almost 1 month. And you will talk with the federal ministry to control with the controlled free market. It's not like whatever they want, they can charge it. And it's same thing happening in the food. Gas cost is way down, but still food price is going up. And they are saying that next year will go up again. And what do you think will cost down of the housing and everything cost down? Because this impact to the people going in the stress. It impact to the health sector too, because lots of people are in stress now because of the rate of increase in interest, food cost increase, housing cost increase, everything is increased. Even the city permit is also way up now than in comparison to last year's.
Thanks. Really good question. So many British Columbians are facing increased costs around rent, around food, around the cost of daily life. And British Columbia is not unique in this. This is a global inflation that we're seeing. Central banks around the world increasing interest rates, which increase costs. Canada's central bank increasing interest rates, which also increase costs for people. So huge pressures right now. At the provincial government level, British Columbians don't expect us to solve this global issue related to the pandemic and the war in Ukraine and supply chain, all these other issues. But they do expect us to support them on the costs of daily life wherever we can. So you'll see us continue to do things like the affordability credit that I announced in my swearing-in speech, the BC Hydro credit, $100 around hydroelectricity, the freezing of ICBC rates for 2 years. Wherever we can provide that support for British Columbians to help bring down those costs or provide stable and predictable costs for them, we're going to do that work. And I'll allow the Minister of Housing to talk about those costs related to housing and how we're going to bring down some of those costs. But on the specific issue of food, I want to talk about that because we haven't addressed that yet. We're seeing a real challenge around rising food costs, but it's also an opportunity for British Columbia. California is reducing food production because of fires and drought, and they are a massive food exporter around the world. British Columbia, we have our agricultural land reserve. We've protected that farmland so that we can provide food to British Columbians and to the world. We need to make sure we're supporting our farmers. We need to make sure that we're supporting food production in British Columbia, but not just growing the food, but also processing the food in British Columbia. So we're not growing crops here, sending them to Washington State, sending them to Alberta to be processed, so that we can grow food here, both for our own market. As we see global food costs go up, when we're growing food in BC, that means lower costs for British Columbians, but also for export. Agriculture is a massive economic driver in British Columbia. If we're exporting food internationally that's grown and processed here, that means jobs for British Columbia, it means money for British Columbians, and it means food security, not just in British Columbia, but for other parts of the world as well. So you'll see Minister Brar working to build those agricultural trade relationships around the world. You'll see our Minister of Agriculture, a new minister from the Fraser Valley, working with farmers to increase food production and processing right here in our province to make sure that we have a strong export market and a strong domestic market. It'll create jobs, it'll bring down prices. It's a really positive story for us if we take advantage of the opportunity we have. I'll turn over to Ravi on the housing issue.
Yeah. I'll just, I think the Premier laid out pretty well. I think inflation is affecting housing in a big way, and new housing that's coming on. Rising interest rates make it harder for developers and builders to build. And so for us, our main focus to bring the cost down is speed. Speed of permits, speed of approvals. If you're sitting with a project and you're waiting for 5 years and trying to hold your money for that long, it's just adding huge costs onto the pressure of the development, then gets passed on to the people. And so for us, addressing the speed and the pace of all the processes will be one way we bring the cost down, as well as the other ways the Premier has highlighted, the households, ICBC, Hydro, all those other pieces. But we're looking at that. It's a very important question, and we'll have more to say that when the housing strategy gets launched in just over a month's time.
Thank you so much.
Like, answer for the control-free market, because the city and it's not control, right? It's a gas price down, but no one did the price down for the food and trades. Container shipping price down was used to be $18,000. Right now it's $1,800 to $2,400 US dollar, and but no one did the down. It's almost 1 month now. And government will do in the control free market, whatever they said, Jagmeet Singh in the House of Commons, to audit the food companies, big audit to the all big companies like Superstore or other companies. But no reply yet. You will talk to the federal?
Yeah, whatever opportunities we can find to support British Columbians, we're gonna do that. You're right that it often seems that prices go up and stay up even when the underlying conditions that cause them price to go up change. So we'll provide those. We'll take action wherever we can to support British Columbians on those important issues around the cost of food, the cost of shipping, and so on. And we also have an important partner in the federal government on these issues as well. So we'll be working with them on that.